Hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody. We are still in line with our theme for February, which is building a growth mindset for your communication, for your social interaction. And today we are going to talk about building resilience in high stakes situations because we encounter all types of high stakes situations in our day to day, whether that be in the professional realm or the more casual realm. But the point is, this is something that we need to be confident and know how to do. So essentially, I'm going to give you some, pointers, some strategies, and at the end we're going to have a Q&A and you get to talk with each other as well. So if that sounds like a good deal to you, we're going to get started. Okay. So you should be able to see my screen. That's perfect. There we are. All right. So when you have challenging conversations, you want to be able to bounce back from those easily. You want to be able to maintain composure. You want to be able to really master your emotions and feel more confident, even in a situation where you might not have that confidence immediately, right? So let's first talk about how can we define a high stakes communication situation? Well, we see that there's pressure, right? Or at least we feel the pressure. There might be ramifications for, not performing in the way that we want to or communicating in the way we want to. So there's significant consequences. It can affect, careers, relationships, reputations. So, you want to be able to recognize the factors that actually elevate the pressure. Some common scenarios, and you can also think of your own as well: presentations to executives, managers, key stakeholders, negotiating critical deals, conflict resolution, and then also delivering difficult feedback. So if you're in the position of giving that feedback and it's difficult feedback that is difficult to share, well, that would be a high stakes situation too. All of these types of situations demand resilience. So the first thing that we need to do is know what our weak spots are, right? We're going to essentially identify the common triggers that are going to be different for everyone. So to do that, you want to first have a self-assessment, right? Think on previous challenging conversations that you had. What exactly triggered, right, these negative reactions on your part or on the other interlocutor's end? Right. So identify also the patterns in these responses. So it's a great thing to do if you have a communication log. You want to maybe highlight in one color, highlight in another color, and see what the patterns are. And that way it's a lot more obvious to you when you're doing that. Do an emotional audit, right? Recognize the emotions that are kind of surfacing. Is it fear? Is it anxiety? Is it anger? What is it? And you really want to take a bird's eye view and figure out if there are any patterns in those emotions as well. Is it mainly anger? Is it mainly anxiety? Is it a mix of both? Because this is going to be the first step to actually addressing them. And then trigger mapping is a great strategy here because, again, you take your communication log and you highlight or circle or even just jot down. You create your own kind of list comprising the common triggers. So are there specific phrases that you use? Is there a certain tone that you fall into? Are there other nonverbal behaviors maybe? Knowing what these triggers are also empowers you to prepare. So it could also be triggers that, other people's tones, right? Other people's phrases that just set you off. So knowing both ends is really going to help you with the trigger mapping so that you can actually become resilient in the face of them. So how do we build a resilient mindset, which of course feeds into a growth mindset? We want to reframe negative thoughts, right? Whenever you have a negative thought, try to flip it. Is there any validity to it? Are they based on facts or assumptions? Can you turn them into a more positive situation? So when we're thinking about reframing, are there certain negative thought patterns that keep popping up? If so, go back to the trigger, right? The trigger mapping, and see if there's anything there that you can find as an overlapping pattern, right? And if so, you'll have an easier time rather reframing, because if it's something that you're constantly used to, you'll be more inclined to fall back on that positive reframing. The other thing is focus on what you can actually control. This is a major theme in the Stoic philosophy, in Stoicism. There's a lot that's outside of our control, but there's some things that are within our control. Our thoughts are within our control. The way we communicate, within our control. How we prepare, within our control, right? Your communication strategy, within our control. How you react to a situation, within our control. And so when you realize how much you can actually control, it gives you some confidence knowing that you are in charge of yourself, right? You might not be able to influence or control other people. Everyone's their own person. You can't control external factors, right? You can't control whether it's going to rain or not, but you can control what you can control, right? So being aware of that and feeling confident in knowing, even out of the millions and trillions of things you cannot control, there are a few important things that you can control. Having a growth perspective is really key because it highlights that growth mindset where you view failure and difficult situations, difficult communication as an opportunity for growth, as a teachable moment. We talked about that last week as well. So try to always find a silver lining, even when it's difficult. Try to see yourself as somebody who is maintaining and nurturing a growth mindset. Step into that identity because it's going to help you with the resilience as well. So we can't talk about building resilience without also talking about emotional regulation, right? And some techniques for staying calm, because when you're in the thick of it, you're really going to want to fall back on some strategies that you've already practiced that are tried and true for you, right? So a few of them are the deep breathing exercises, having slow, controlled breaths, right? Calming the parasympathetic nervous system, using breathing techniques in your conversations. No one's going to find that odd because we're breathing all the time, right? Practicing these deep, controlled breaths can really do you a great service, especially in high stakes situation. Being mindful, right? As much as you can, as often as you can, try to find, moments and pockets in your day where you're being mindful, where you're cultivating awareness for the present moment. Focus on your 5 senses, right? Things you can see, things you can hear, things you can taste, things you can smell, things you can touch. That helps reduce the tendency some of us might have for ruminating. And it can also, deter you from overthinking. It can reduce your anxiety and your social anxiety. So these are great techniques. And also when you're doing this, you're going to notice being more enhanced in your emotional regulation. And then we can also think about visualization, right? This is a very powerful technique where you're visualizing a positive, successful communication outcome, the way that it goes for you, that you're happy that situation, how it went, right? So you ask someone, you invite them somewhere. The positive situation would be for them to say yes, to accept your invitation. When you have you're negotiating a pay raise, you get that pay raise, right? That's a positive outcome, positive visualization. And then you want to take it a step further and start to visualize how you are interacting in that situation. So not just the positive communication outcome, the successful outcome that you're looking for, but also how you are interacting, right? You're calm, you're confident, you're composed. This kind of reconning ahead of time can strengthen those neural pathways because you're doing that mental rehearsal. And that's what you kind of fall back on. That's what you expect. You can even think of it as manifesting this situation, right? That you actually believe it and you become it. And then when it comes time to perform it and do it, you're actually the calm, composed, confident version of yourself. So that's something I highly recommend as well. So these 3 techniques are really going to serve you very well, not just in high stakes situations, but in any type of social situation. So of course we have to talk about active listening. You want to hear beyond the words that you hear, right? What does that mean? Well, you're paying attention to tone. You're paying attention to nonverbals. You're paying attention to pacing. You're paying attention to maybe other factors that you've noticed, how the person normally communicates and how they maybe are communicating in this speech event. So make sure you're focused, right? Minimize your distractions. Be sure that you're engaging fully. You want to empathize, try to understand their perspective. And if you don't understand it, ask them, right? Ask for clarifying questions. Ask for, ask to elaborate, to clarify. This is very important. You really want to make sure that you understand the message, because if you don't, then a lot's going to get jumbled and it's going to be very easy for there to be a miscommunication, which can also lead to conflict, which we don't want. So don't make assumptions, clarify. And then summarize, right? Confirm understanding, show active engagement. Okay. So first of all, when you're trying to think of the best way to understand and unpack a high stakes situation and then communicate in a way that's going to be, showing and displaying your confidence, what's the reason? What's the purpose behind this communication, right? What outcome are you looking for? Be really clear on that. Then, in order to get that outcome, think about what are the points? What do I have to hit? What are the steps I need to take? What do I need to mention? What data do I need to show? How do I need to behave? What are my nonverbals going to look like? How important is active listening in this situation? And so on and so forth. So you want to organize those points, be clear on structure, and then think about the delivery, right? So not just the way you're speaking, but the way you're also engaged nonverbally, your tone, your nonverbals, your paralinguistics, your, even how you're dressed, your manner, all of this. And then lastly, think about, okay, well, how can I step into the confident version of myself? What is the confident version of me going to be doing in this speech event, in this speech act? And again, that kind of ties back to your visualization, right? Because you've done that mental rehearsal and said, okay, I see this successful communication outcome. What do I need to do? How do I need to act to be able to make that a reality? So it comes down to these 4 things. Okay. This is a really important step that often gets overlooked. The self-reflection, the awareness, right? You really, really do not want to miss this step, because it's in moments like these where you're going to learn from every experience. So look back on a high stakes situation, okay? A high stakes communication, event, speech act, whatnot. What did you do well? So start with the positive, right? What did you do well? Oh, my, active listening was really good. Or I was very animated. Or I was, just enough reserved, and I had balanced assertiveness and confidence really well. Then think about what are the things that you could have improved upon. right? Oh, maybe, my tone was not as strong as it could have been, or maybe I wasn't as confident as I should have been. What are the things, right? This is where you're going to like look back with a critical eye and think, okay, this is what I can improve upon. So your weakness is essentially in that isolated event, or maybe even in a few events, right? If it's every time you are negotiating, then you can group those together. And then lastly, think about, okay, what are the insights that I learned and how can I apply them to my future interactions? So just these 3 steps are going to get you from mediocre to master, right? Of course, not just in that one trajectory, but of course the steps along the way. But I really, really encourage you to do this. And this is what I don't see enough of, right? I do not see enough of this. So this is where part of the magic happens in that, reflection. Okay, so some things that can really help, in addition to being in the community and communicating with each other and joining these calls and setting up your own calls in our social pods, community buzz space. Role playing is a great one, right? You can even do this together where you say, let's practice a negotiation. And so you get a few people together and you practice that. A debate where you're, debating the pros and cons of something. Doing some public speaking. So that could even just be, giving someone your elevator pitch in the community and, relaying that information to people in the community. Or you could also, put together a little, tell me about yourself spiel, and you practice that. And you can even record it and publish it in the community as well. I love that. I'm so glad that you're both on the call and you asked that question and that Jaspreet gave a great overview. Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was improvisation right there that you practiced, right? So
Yes,
what's really great about improvisation, and again, that's why I really recommend, I noticed Jaspreet added a few calls to the networking community buzz space, which was excellent. Those are great opportunities for you to practice improvisation, right? Essentially, it's just casual conversation, informal chats where you just have to be able to respond to a question, where you ask somebody a question, where you are very involved like that. And that's improvisation, right? It's natural conversation. So this is very, very important. Okay, excellent. So we're going to have some time now to chat a little bit, but the key takeaways, and then, you'll watch the replay as well, just to make sure that you got everything. The first thing is the self-awareness, right? Identify the triggers that kind of not necessarily push you over the edge, but get you in a space where where it feels like it's difficult conversation, right? Then you want to think about your emotional regulation and refer to the techniques we discussed. Do your best to stay calm. And again, practice that, because it's not always easy, right? It's not easy. And then lastly, active listening. Well, not lastly, but active listening. Make sure that you're really hearing others, because in a high stakes situation, it's very easy to just shut that down, right? To shut down your active listening and to feel maybe to be defensive, right? If somebody gives you some feedback that you weren't expecting, you shut down, right? You stop listening to that feedback. We don't want to do that, right? We really want to think about, okay, how can I be objective here? How can I imagine that feedback is for somebody else, not for you, right? Try to distance yourself from that kind of closeness to that feedback, for example, or in any other high stakes situation. And then have a strategy, right? We looked at some ways of having strategic communication. Ultimately, the bottom line is, how can you be as clear as possible? What does that look like? What does that mean? Okay, so I have a section now where I want to do some Q&A. We can clarify any, doubts. We can share some experiences that you're going to share to each other. And then if you have any like material, like, oh, you read an interesting book and you want to share that, or you know, you have another, like you saw a movie about something that, you know, made you think of that kind of situation. Share that, right? So let's talk about some biggest takeaways. Any takeaways? That's excellent too, Jaspreet, because right there you just gave an example of reframing. Right? Do you see that? So that's very helpful, right? That's an incredibly helpful perspective to have. And I know that, you know, I think it was Carolina who brought this up. There was a great exchange. Rudy had posted something. Shout out to Rudy if you're watching the replay, where I think the three of you engaged in a conversation in that post. And it was something to the effect of, oh, I thought all, you know, native speakers were already perfect communicators. No, not at all, right? We have to learn how to communicate well if you're a native speaker or if you're an L2 English speaker. So yeah, coming to that realization, I think, is also really empowering, right? French is one of the languages I speak as a second language. And I remember people in France saying, like, you know, some of these phrases better than we do as native French speakers. And I thought that was so interesting, because I was like, shouldn't you just know these already? But no, we have to learn them. So just another example there, right? So we're learning these strategies for communication and applying them. It doesn't matter if you're a native English speaker or not, right? It's about communication. So that's excellent. Okay, now I would like the two of you to talk about this question here. Can you recall a recent high stakes communication moment? It could be, you know, in a casual setting, like you are sharing some tough feedback with somebody, or it could be, you know, a situation where you're talking to your boss and, you know, or you might be in an interview. What is a recent high stakes communication moment that you've had? And then the second part to that question is, how would you handle it differently after what we shared in this class? How would it be different now that you know what you know? Okay, so I'm going to let you two talk about that. Whenever you can join. And you know, when you have a moment, even if it's, you know, 10 minutes, like I said, even that has the value. There's value in that too, right? Okay, this last question, I want you to think about, and I want you to answer in the post. Okay, so think about some of your own personal communication triggers, and then how do you plan on managing them? So review the replay, look at what we talked about with the triggers, and then I want you to think about, so this is going to take some time to think about. I really want you to sit with it. I'm not expecting you to answer this right away, because, you know, we have to reflect. So think about those personal communication triggers, and then what are you going to do to manage them, and just give maybe 1 or 2 steps. And then maybe someone else can share. When someone else shares theirs, you can, you know, share some positive feedback as well. Okay? Does that sound good? All right. So thank you guys for joining, and well done today. And let's definitely continue the conversation in the post.
Sure.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, Jasper.
Take care.